Look, let's talk, shall we, about migration. The population of England and Wales, get this, everybody, it's expanded by more than 700,000 people in 1 year. Of course, you guessed it, because of net migration. That's not far off a city like Liverpool being added to the UK. Matt Goodwin, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is a disaster. It's more evidence of our population explosion. I've written about this for much of the last 2 years. Just to put this in perspective, this annual increase in 1 year of 700,000, nearly a million, is the second highest figure on record since 1949, the highest being the year before this one. And it's not actually correct, Michelle, to say this is adding a city the size of Liverpool to the population
While
of
you're
England
talking, by
and
the way,
Wales
I'm just going to demonstrate on the screen what you're reflecting.
In 1 year. It's not right to see that big uptick on the right, that big surge. It's not right to say that's adding a city the size of Liverpool to England and Wales, because that city is entirely comprised of migrants. So mass immigration, this data shows, is now the only driver of our population. Prior to the 2000s, it had been what demographers call natural change. So the British, the English, the Welsh having children, and those children being more numerous than the people who are passing away. Today, this morning, we learned births in this country at the lowest level since 2002, among the lowest levels on record. So the only thing that is driving our population is mass immigration, to which the left say, well, we need more immigration. Wrong. What we need to do is end mass uncontrolled immigration, have a government that incentivizes people to have more children, that talks about pro-family policy and says, we do not want to live through the complete transformation, some might say replacement, of our nation through mass uncontrolled immigration. It has to stop.
Aaron?
So one good data point, I mean, Matt's broadly right in terms of, there isn't growth coming from births, which is historically how this country's population increased. But we had slightly more births than we did deaths. You look at somewhere like China or Singapore or South Korea, that's the reverse. And it's a very bad place to be in, whether you have migration or not. I mean, if you have no migration, it's a really bad place to be in. So that's something. We're not in such a sticky situation like China, where just extraordinary. In some cities, about a third of child daycare centres have shut in the last couple of years. What Matt said also about needing bigger families is true. If you want migration in this country of, say, 100, 200,000 net a year, which I presume you do, let's say 100,000 net.
Lower. But
medium term. I mean, maybe you want zero or even minus, but let's say you need 100,000. Let's just say that, okay? Broadly, which is, margin of error, it might be net minus 100,000 or plus 100,000. If you want to do that, you are going to have larger families. You're going to need to have a fertility rate of close to 2.1, which is replacement. Now, people might be saying, why? We want a smaller population because, of course, then you'll have more housing available. The parts of the country might feel less crowded, which is fine. If you want your population to fall, you want it to happen slowly. So you want to have a fertility rate of, say, 1.9, 1.8. You don't want to be like, I say, Singapore or Malta, where it's 0.8, because you get a very large group of elderly people who don't work, and you get a shrinking, comparatively speaking, group of people in the labour market who pay taxes to look after those elderly people. You don't want to be in that situation. So I think it's incumbent on people like Matt who want low migration, and he said it, if we're going to move away from that model, we need to have larger families. How do we get there?
Goodwin.
How do we get there? How do we get there?
I don't think people watching this show understand how... They do understand this, but let me just underline how historic this is. In every year since 1997, every single year, there has been more immigration into these islands than there was in total between the Anglo-Saxon era in the 5th and 6th century and the start of World War II. Between the 500s and 600s and the Second World War, there has been more immigration in every single year since 1997 than there was over that entire period. This has never happened before. So when the left say, well, we were always a country of immigration, wrong. We've never done that. So the question then is, how do you fix it? Immediate freeze on mass uncontrolled immigration. How do you engineer a pro-family policy? I'll give you two ideas. One, you start going completely overboard with the number of tax incentives and monetary incentives that people have to have more kids, and you make that, I'm going to I'm going to really say something controversial. You make that exclusive to the British population. If you're not British, you don't get those benefits.
What does that mean?
It means that if you are, let's say, part of the non-British community in this country that is claiming £12 billion of welfare paid for by the people watching this show, you're not going to get the tax incentives that I'm about to say. Let's say, for example,
I'm not trying to catch
0%.
Just to clarify. So if somebody's half Jamaican, born here, half white, half Jamaican, I presume you mean they're British.
If somebody has a British passport, then these
Right.
tax incentives can be open to them, OK? But what I'm not interested in are people who have been in this country for 2 minutes. What I'm saying is, let's think about 0% mortgages for people who have 3 or more kids. Let's do what Hungary does. If you have 3 or more children, major tax incentives across the board. But let's go further. What does cultural change look like? We basically have banned smoking or reduced smoking in this country, not just by making cigarettes more expensive. We've brought about a wholesale culture change in this country, a bit like we have for all the wrong reasons with net zero. We've changed the culture and the environment. What we need is a governments in this country who change the culture on family in the same way. They establish completely new cultural norms that say there is an expectation now in this country that you will have 2, 3, 4 children in the way that Israel does, in the way that Hungary does, in the way that Poland does. Now, Hungary and Poland, the evidence isn't quite there to suggest they are getting to where Israel is. But what Israel have done is very interesting. They've said this is about survival. This is about the survival of the country. And I have to say, lots of people will scream at me online after this. The West and Western nations now need to start talking about family policy in terms of survival. Not only tax incentives, but in terms of the survival of their nations.
Well, the easy thing that Matt hasn't mentioned is, of course, stopping emigration. If you really want the survival of the British nation, this continuous kind of British people that have been here, like he says, broadly speaking, in England anyway, since the 5th, 6th century, you'd have to stop emigration. And the reality is lots of Brits like to emigrate.
Not that many, though. Last year, 50,000.
I think even today, I don't know the precise numbers, but I think speaking right now, I think there's about 5 or 6 million people worldwide who are UK born, who are living elsewhere, many doing very well for themselves.
There's lots of conversations about younger people as well.
Yeah. And why do they want to leave?
Well, quite. Or some people left 30, 40 years ago. But my broader point is that if you want to do that, I think that's a big thing. And right now the incentives are to leave rather than to come back. And we probably disagree about how to change that, but that's a thing. And I do agree that we need bigger incentives to have families.
We also need housing, because the one thing you and I would agree on is unless you have a viable housing market that can give young British people housing, they're not going to have children. And the trade-off is this. You can have affordable, available housing in this country, or you can have mass uncontrolled immigration. You cannot have both. And we need a political leader that has the guts to stand up and say that to the British people. 700,000 in 1 year. 700,000 people added to the population. Do you know how many houses we built in that same year? 190,000. Can somebody solve the riddle of housing in this country? Because Keir Starmer's today, he's come out, he said, well, we're going to build more housing. Our population in England and Wales is growing by 700,000 in 1 year, and we're building 190,000 homes. It's ridiculous. You cannot simultaneously have mass uncontrolled immigration and increasing your population by 1% every year and gaslight the British people by saying you're going to solve the housing crisis. It is completely ridiculous.
You're going to have to change a lot of hearts and minds, though, because if I think about my generation of women, you all know how things used to be. It used to be that women, and I'll get in trouble for saying this, but I can say because I'm a woman, women used to be at home, you used to raise your family, you didn't used to work, you used to be able to live on single incomes. Now, talk to many young women, not that I'm saying I'm young anymore, but talk to younger women, and they will sit there and they will say, I don't want my kids until I'm in my 40s. What then happens is men don't want to settle down until much later. Women don't want to settle down until much later because they want to build their careers as well. No one has proper conversations about the ticking biological clocks for women. Well, you pretend that women can have it all. They can't. They get into their 40s. If they're lucky, they have one child. Then they sit there and realise this myth that they've been told that they can have it all. Guess what? No, they can't, because their eggs are absolutely no good. You won't even scramble them, quite frankly. And we don't tell women the truth about that.
But just briefly, take education as an example. Why do we not teach children through primary and secondary school about the biological reality of children in a serious way? We teach them not to smoke. We teach them about net zero. We teach them about how racist our countries are. We do not actually explain in detail the biological reality of having children. There are, when people throw their arms up, they say we can't encourage people to have more kids.
It's worse than that.
We can do so much.
We teach how to prevent having children. So what we actually teach in sex education, and I do confess it's been quite a while since I was having those kind of lessons, but we teach things like contraception, all those kind of things. So actually we would proactively be teaching younger people how to prevent having babies. But anyway,